Episode number 316, NRB 2021 Backstage Pass, Part 2 with Clint Lewis and Tia Bowen. Let's do it.
This is the definitive podcast for helping you plan, create, and execute dynamic worship experiences at your church. Useful, practical content in the areas of production, worship, communications, first impressions, and more. This is Making Sunday Happen.
Hey guys, welcome to Making Sunday Happen. This is episode number 316 of our show. We are here week 2 at NRB 2021. If you missed last week's episode with Dan Crystal and Bob Pritchett from Faith Life, Dan was from Thrive Conferences. Bob was the CEO, or is the CEO of Faith Life. So I want to encourage you to jump back to that episode. Great interviews with both of those guys. And this week, we're going to share 3 different interviews. One with Clint Lewis, who is the Communications Director at Gateway Church here in Dallas. Also, Tia Bowen, who is the Director of Digital Strategies at Gateway. And also, I'm going to share a bonus interview with you with Shannon Bennett. Now, Shannon is the Chief Marketing Officer at the Museum of the Bible. And so if you are looking to send folks, or if you're looking to go to the museum and record some of your sermon or your messages, Shannon has some great ideas for that. They did some great innovative work last year to bring pastors and speakers into the museum to shoot their sermon series right by Bible artifacts. So it was really incredible. I'm going to talk to Shannon all about that. So all 3 of those interviews, Clint, Tia, and Shannon, are all up in just a few minutes on the podcast. But first, a word from our sponsor. So check this out. Hey guys, I wanted to let you know about a brand new project that we're a part of. We have teamed up with NRB, the National Religious Broadcasters, to bring you a 10-class course called Church Media Masterclass. This course will give you practical training as a church tech and communicator and feature incredible content from my friend Phil Cook, yours truly, Dan Darling from NRB, Stephen Brewster, Mark McDonald, Brad Weston from ProPresenter, Nate Anderson from Resi, Jeff Reed from Stadia Church Planning, Josh Brown from His Productions, our creative director Sean Reese, and more. This is conference-level content for an extremely low price. I'm talking under $10 per class. Register for the Church Media Masterclass today at churchmediamasterclass.com. That's churchmediamasterclass.com. Hey guys, I'm hanging out with Clint Lewis. He's the Communications Director at Gateway Church here in Dallas. We're here for the NRB convention here in Grapevine. So this is right down the road from you, right, Clint?
It sure is, Carl.
You came over just for me, so thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Just kidding. All right, so give us a little context of Gateway. You have how many campuses around Texas and beyond, right?
We do. We have 9 campuses currently in Dallas-Fort Worth. 8. And then we have a 9th campus up in Jackson, Wyoming. So we have 9 total throughout Dallas-Fort Worth, and then one up in Wyoming. Yeah. And then we have multiple campuses at different prisons throughout Texas awesome. As well.
So they stream your content inside the prisons there?
They sure do. Awesome. And I'd also like to add, we have many, many gatherings throughout the country that have really became a reality throughout the pandemic and then post-pandemic in 2021.
Gotcha. So speaking of that, give us an kind of an update of where you guys are. You're in Texas, so you're meeting in person, right?
Correct.
Okay. So kind of as a communications director, what did you see the last year? How did you guys kind of shift around? What does it look like now? Give me a temperature update.
Wow, that's a big question. And how long do we have?
I know, really.
About an hour?
Exactly. Keep it running if you...
I would say there was about 2 or 3 different really big phases that I would kind of put it into a box, if you will. And really that front end phase lasted months, and you didn't know what tomorrow was going to look like. And it was a daily, again, the words that came out of 2020, of course, daily pivot.
Right. Pivot, unprecedented, new normal.
All the things.
Right.
So it was hard with not Enneagram, but a strength of futuristic. I had a challenge really seeing kind of what was next, if you will. So that was kind of that first phase. And then as things started to become, okay, this is what the new rhythm is going to look like, we began to plan for what is it going to look like when we re-enter.
Right.
And so we then maintained and sustained what we had, which was all online. And then from there, we began to plan for, okay, when we do get to meet again, what's that going to look like? What signage do we need? What communication do we need? What are the seats going to look like? And where we really landed, both as a strategic task force team that I was on, but also just in leadership, we realized what we needed to do is to find one source of truth. And for us here in Texas, that ended up becoming Governor Abbott and how he was leading the state. And so we really focused on different, I guess, markers and data and information that's coming out of Governor Abbott's office. And then we would take that lead. The other thing that I tried to do is to see if there was any churches that went ahead of us. And there was a local church here that actually reopened before we did. And we were on the phone together, talking, having conversations, what worked for them, what didn't, what was their community communicating with them as far as distance, seats, skipping every other row, things like that. And so we seeked counsel with other churches, but we also followed the lead of Governor Abbott. But it was definitely a challenging season. And then you fast forward to where we are now. We're definitely in our new rhythm of what normal is. We have actually, the positive that came out of COVID in that season was that we were a certain number prior to, but it has opened up so many more opportunities to reach so many more people. And as we like to say at Gateway, we're all about people. Yeah. So if we have the opportunity to reach and impact and help lead more people to Jesus and to following him, then it was worth all the pivots and new normals and unprecedented that we went through.
So I agree with you. I think that there are some good things that came out of this whole thing. And I think that one of it is a lot of pastors had to accelerate into digital faster than they had planned previously. But it also put some things in place that we're probably never going to leave us. We're not going to stop doing those things. What were some of those things for Gateway that you're like, we moved here? Oh, we're going to stay there.
Ooh, that, again, great question. You're good at this. I would say that, yes, we went digital, but for us, there was a lot of prep work. And my counterpart, Tia, who's over our digital strategy team, she and I talk a lot about how we really know that the Lord set us up. We call it the setup season. And for about a year and a half, there was a setup for technology, whether it be Zoom. Right. We had that all already ready, locked and loaded, whether it be certain amount of bandwidth that we needed for streaming that we were able to increase when the demand came, the consumer demand as far as wanting to consume. And then when we saw it, during the week, if you will, just kind of level down, we were able to pull that back just to steward those dollars for cost. Right. So I would say the main thing is that it really changed thinking digital first, whereas it flipped it around. Now, there's nothing that can replace, and Pastor Robert talks a lot about this, there's nothing that can replace in-person worship together.
Right.
And I'm sorry, but
nor do we want to.
No, the online does not replace that. However, it has opened up, and to answer your question very directly, it has opened up things like our Gateway gatherings, which in any city, anybody watching this, you can join a Gateway gathering. You can start your own Gateway gathering, and it begins in the home. And then we have resources that we provide to help to them to be a part of a Gateway gathering. But we really saw the value of our online audience, and we did see it as far as the numbers. It was tenfold, and during COVID, we hit our peak of over 300,000 people that connected with us and engaged and joined online. And then even this last year, we exceeded that, where this last Easter, in person and online and through Gateway gatherings, we had over 370,000 people who partnered with us as part of our Easter experience and our weekend.
So we're here hanging out at the NRB, and you're speaking, or you did speak earlier today, right?
I did.
Tell me a little bit of the content of that presentation.
Well, we talked, Tia and I talked about just taking your live stream to the next level. And what we decided to do, instead of focusing on some of the mechanics of how do you take your live stream to a new level, we wanted to give the audience understanding who was out there, listening, practical things like being willing and open to think differently, being willing to serve in areas where maybe you weren't supposed to, or it's not in the job description to serve. We talked about our text 71010, text connect to 71010 technology that we had launched, but we really took to another level during COVID, and that was our bridge to connect with people, where we had pastors and all different, team members, not just pastors, that were connecting with people.
How does that work? So they're...
Oh, do you have a phone?
I do. So yeah. So walk me through that as a hypothetical. I'm going to text this number as a congregational member.
Yeah.
And what happens?
So through the weekend service experience, what the word that we locked on was connect. And so what we really felt like, what felt right was, we want to be connected with you. And in a world that we were hearing, we're more connected than ever when we weren't. That was this yin and a yang of no, we're not. We're more disconnected than ever. But no, we're more connected than ever. No, we're not. We're not together. They're telling us not to hug, not to touch, not to be connected. So we use the word connect, and that was one of our key words. Another that we'd use would be baptism, and we would do and promote in-home baptisms.
Oh, great.
The other is decision. So if somebody came to Christ. So those key words then would go into a link tree, and we would be able to connect the different word or the different need. I'll give you a practical, I'll give you a realistic. So if you could think about it from two different angles, we had marketing and communication and promotions internally to our people. So they'd see us on a weekend service, they'd see it through a social media post, they'd see it in an email, some sort of communication that was owned.
Yeah.
Then we also had some paid media that was being pushed out there through digital as well as some traditional. And we were actually in the Dallas market and inviting people, if you are hurting, broken, or lost, falling on a hard time, text the word connect, and we have somebody available. And we had a gentleman, you got to remember, we're in Dallas, Fort Worth.
Right.
So about, I think it's 300 miles away, forgive me, maybe 500 miles, I can't remember, but in El Paso, Texas. So many, many, many miles away, saw a digital ad that said this message: if you need help, if you're broken, text the word connect 71010. Well, he didn't text the word connect. He actually texted, I want to end my life. And this was on a Saturday night at about 8:15 p.m. and I was at dinner and I saw it come in. And about a minute later it said, now. So we quickly got a care pastor on the phone, got with him and got him the help that he needed. So the text line, it took on a life of its own. The way that people in marketing that were from kind of my past occupation before I came to Gateway Church and serving on staff full time, had reached out to me and said, this is brilliant from the perspective of a lot of companies are communicating and marketing and promoting, we're here for you. We'd love to help you, but nobody answered the how. How are you going to help me, MasterCard? How are you going to help me, Chevy? How are you here for me to help pay the bills or to help pray for? And so at Gateway, we literally had a text line that got a response and had people on the other end of the line that our slogan, our tagline, our why is that we're all about people. Yeah. So that's why we did it, because we're all about people. So we built a bridge to people and then responded accordingly.
So what were some other things in your talk on how to take my live stream to the next level?
I would say some of the highlights would be just, again, increasing your bandwidth, delivering content that the consumers are wanting or interested in. So we had to change some of the content that we had to be more focused on online only. And so I think many people in media don't change the way they do what they do. It's just what we do. So if a consumer wants something different, how are you going to change it? And I think, T and I talked at length about this, as well as working with the ministries and just realizing it became an on-demand world overnight. So we had to shift that thought as well, is to be able to provide our services for people at any time that they wanted it. That wasn't previously how we did it.
So I'm a pastor, let's say, and I can do that no matter what size church, context, I can do that, right? It's not just
absolutely.
Gateway's huge, of course they can. It's not that. So give me, pastor of a 200-member church, how can I take some of those principles and apply them to me?
Well, I think what you can do is that you can provide your services through a stream through Facebook, as an example. I mean, anyone can do that.
Right.
You can make it even available to rewatch through YouTube,
right.
Things like that. Those are things that any pastor can do, any size church. Some of the other things, we actually had a question from a pastor in South Arlington that I talked to him beforehand. He asked a really good question, because T and I had mentioned partnering with outside vendors or using resources to partner with others.
Right.
And he wanted to know kind of what did that look like. And for us, it looked on comms, partnering with like some video capture content people and teams. Instead of them going in and capturing a worship service inside of the church building, that person was contracted to go to a hospital where we were praying for our frontline workers and nurses and doctors at a hospital parking lot, and capture that for us to be able to share that later. So on the side of the stream and the technology, there's a partner that we work with that helps us with our stream. So that person, we talked, and the question was like, what does that look like? And for us, it's incorporating that person into your team. Right. Not just it being a transactional business,
right,
but it being more of a relational
right.
touch point, and they're part of your team.
So instead of considering them a vendor or 100%. Contract, it's their team member. And
so I think to any pastor that's out there, if you have partners and vendors that you're paying to do work, make sure that they're like-minded, aligned. Those are just some practical points.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it.
I could talk for hours. Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm hanging out with Tia Bowen, Director of Digital Strategies at Gateway Church here in Dallas. Tia, you talked today, you did a session all about how to take your live stream to the next level.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit of the content that you guys shared in that session.
Well, it was all over the map in a good way, hopefully. I think what we realized there is an endless supply of technical things that can get you to a live stream, right? Like you can use free on Facebook, you can use YouTube, you can pay money and use a service and do it through your own apps or your website. There are a lot of ways to do it. But I think one of the biggest things just to realize is like what we honed in on for last year, which was when kind of our live stream changed, was what is the biggest thing that we need to talk about right now, and how can we have all hands on deck to make us do this one thing really well? So we called it a pivot party. It was become a common phrase at our church. But we just had a pivot party left and right. And we reassigned roles to people. We had people hyper-focused on certain areas where maybe they would do kind of 3 or 4 things during, a week. And we had them hyper-focused on one thing or another. Right. We weren't afraid to change up our weekly programming. We weren't afraid to try some new things. And we changed up, I think I told people about 60% of our website that we adjusted in the first 2 to 3 weeks of the pandemic launching. And so I think really the biggest thing was just being able to pivot and go where change needs to happen, and don't be afraid to make it happen, step out in the waters, try new things. That was a lot of what we discussed.
So we're kind of a year out from a lot of that stuff. Yes. Okay, so
thank God, right?
Right. So obviously a lot of churches have figured out the live stream game, or at least they're on in some capacity. All right, so get us to a 2.0, 3.0 place. You know what I'm asking?
Yeah.
So how do we now, we're a year later, how do we, now obviously we're going to not stop doing the things that we started. Yeah. So take me to that 2.0, 3.0 level.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you specifically on our side of things, we have some pretty big dreams about how we would love for our online experience to vary moving forward. So we had this conversation in the middle of the pandemic last year and realized this is not the time to be having this conversation in like May of last year. Like, let's put this on hold. But what does it really look like to create an experience where you're not just a fly on the wall watching it happen in 2D? What would it be like to tailor an entire experience to the ones watching? And so it's really good that we put it on pause, because throughout, I think my coworker Clint mentioned that we have Gateway gatherings that launched, which are kind of like, a little bit different than like a home group or something like that, because it's all just based around the weekend service and gathering for places that maybe want to be a part of Gateway but aren't close to a physical campus. So now what we have in mind is, how do we now tailor potentially in our future an online experience for our gatherings that is specific to our gatherings. Good. So the language we use is toward them, the graphics we show are towards them, and that everything is geared towards either being a part of a gathering or becoming a part of a gathering.
So I'm phrasing it like this. I want to get your thoughts on it. I'm phrasing it like your online experience should be treated as a campus of your church. So if you were to start another campus and have a physical location, you're not going to leave it empty. You're going to staff it. You're going to you're going to be intentional about how you program for it. You're going to, all of those things. Would you agree that we kind of need to move that direction for online? That's
kind of amazing that you asked, because it's 100% how I'm sitting in the seat that I am in. Gateway, we have never had an online campus before. What we had pre-pandemic is we always had a broadcast, and we had a stream where you could tune into our broadcast campus and watch our flagship campus do the service. And it was mainly geared towards, if you're traveling, if you can't make it, we wanted our people to still be able to connect with us. Well, that's not what happened during the pandemic. So actually my old boss I was in a different role when COVID struck, and I was leading our social media and digital connection team. So over texting and email. And when the pandemic hit and we realized there was such a need for us to pastor a community outside of our campuses and what we'd always done, my previous boss stepped up and said, okay, I can help lead that. Like during this time, like we seem to be running on all cylinders. We've got the right people doing the right things. And he took it upon himself to really start doing that. Well, it made COVID kind of forced our hand in starting an online campus. So he is now our online campus pastor. And through that, I'm in the seat I'm now in. And so, yes, I would say it's very important. And, determining like what we really had started out doing as Gateway was, okay, well, when we launch a campus, we launch with this always. And it was like, so we started going down that road and it was like, hold up, wait, is that what we need to do? Or do we need to like look at exactly how ministry needs to happen to these people and then make sure we are able to provide that? So how do we hire the right people in the right positions, and how do we kind of retailor some things to make sure that you're reaching the right people? So last kind of concept for you is you work in digital strategies. So you work a little bit, so we focus on the worship experience, but the worship experience there's things that come before it and things that we can take the worship service and experience beyond Sunday, right? So walk out those two areas. What are some things you do to promote, and what are some things you do to make the experience last beyond the weekend? So, really we do an invite each week on our social media, telling people like, hey, here's what's coming up. If there's a special element happening on the weekend, is it communion weekend, baptism weekend? Is it Father's Day weekend? Is there something like really exciting? Make sure we talk about it. Do we have a guest speaker, a guest worship leader coming in? We make sure people know about those moments. And so we send that out. And one of our most favorite things is showing our people in that process. So our people during the weekends, and like, hey, here's what you can expect when you come on the weekend, which is all really important to us. And then once the weekend happens, our team is there capturing. We know what the worship set lists are going to be that weekend. So we're like, oh yeah, like we want to capture this song with this worship leader and show how it maybe, lives on. We're also capturing in real time, taking sermon notes down, getting content. So as soon as the sermon's over, a couple hours later, we got a sermon quote going out. We're showing worship from the weekend of what people can experience and extending the invitation again to come on Sunday. Then throughout the week, we have it peppered in through our church-wide email blast that we send out each week, kind of like a newsletter, through other social media posts that go out, just reminding people like, hey, here's what you missed if you want to get caught up before next weekend, if it's part of a series. We're just pretty intentional about including it throughout the week in all of our communication.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned the content piece, especially like the sermon content, things like that, because we'll have churches ask us, well, I don't know what content to share. Like, you're a content machine every weekend. Like, pull from the sermon notes, 100%. Pull from the worship set, pull from it's all there, right there for you.
I think the biggest thing too is getting out of your head that you always need to create new content. So we're a church who's been around. We just celebrated our 21st year birthday, anniversary, whatever you want to call it. And we're like, there cannot be anything new under the sun that we haven't covered in 21 years. We know what our pillars are of our church. We know what our important foundational truths. And I can tell you that in 21 years, through all the equip classes that we have, through all the conferences and special events and weekends, we've covered it. So can we be strategic and pull out some of that content? It may not look great. The cameras may have been upgraded since then. So can we just use audio? Can we be strategic about just using it, putting it over a graphic? Get out of your head of thinking it has to look a certain way or be a certain way.
So think through, how can I repurpose? Oh
my goodness, yes. Or use that for your captions, that could go on social media. Use it for a long blog post. Use it for something written. There's so much probably good, rich content at your fingertips. Or lean into more of your staff. What we always say, I might head up digital strategy, but I'm not the only one who can come up with good strategy. So I don't care which team it is. You can help me out and let's go for it. So pull on different members of your church too to help provide that thing.
Good. That's great insight. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, I'm hanging out with Shannon Bennett. Shannon is the Chief Marketing Officer at Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. Shannon, welcome. Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you.
So I was telling you, we have a family visit. My family's going to go next month to D.C. So lots of great stuff for families there at the museum. And we were also talking that you guys do a lot for pastors, which we serve a lot of pastors and tech leaders, worship leaders. So I'd love to know, last year you were telling me that pastors really got creative during the pandemic because they couldn't meet in person. So tell me what they were doing.
Sure. So our local DC area pastors were live streaming, as many were. And they wanted to shake it up a little bit after a few months of kind of doing the same thing in the same space. They called us and a pastor would say, I'm preaching on this topic or that topic. And I know in the museum you have this artifact or you have this exhibit. And I think it'd be great if I could come and film my Sunday sermon there and talk about it. So you name it, any topic in the Bible, which of course is what you're preaching about, we've got something connected to it. So with that, we started getting a series of pastors coming in to film their Sunday sermons, and their congregations loved it. And then it started getting a little bit bigger. So we started getting inquiries from pastors at the national level. Pastor Jack Graham did his Easter special at the museum. And then we had Pastor Hibbs from California do a teaching there. He'd actually brought a group in from his church and saw the backdrop and heard about what had been happening with some of the others and said, while I'm here. So it's kind of become a whole side ministry for us, is giving us pastors the backdrop and the space to be able to teach using our artifacts. Of course, we've got over 1,000 items in the museum itself, and exhibits on everything from the Bible in America, the history of the Bible, of course, the stories of the Bible itself. So it's kind of, you name it, whatever a pastor wants to teach on, we've got something that connects to it, and it can really enhance their sermon.
So you were closed for a period of time?
We were, like many, we were shut down from mid-March until the end of June, opened up as soon as possible.
So you opened up fairly early, right?
We did. The second we were able to, we did. And the first thing we did was call our churches in the area and let them know, because they couldn't meet in their own spaces because of the size of the space. But the museum is the size of 7 football fields. It's 430,000 square feet. So we could say, come on in. There's plenty of space to distance. in our big museum, and you can actually be with your people as you explore the Bible together.
So did you have any teachings or gatherings in there, or just like explore the Bible, the museum together, that sort of thing?
It was just a chance to fellowship with still maintaining social distance and being safe about it. Of course, we cleaned all the time. We observed all the protocols we needed to be able to do that. But in a building that size with 40-foot ceilings, it's just a much safer environment than many churches, physical churches.
So give me a little history of the museum. So this is a labor of love for many years, right? It was several years in the making.
It was.
And so tell me about, it's only been open a few years, correct? So kind of give me a little history on it.
Sure. So really the dream kind of started back in 2009 when our founders were asked to help purchase some items for a smaller museum that was being planned for Dallas. The Dallas Museum didn't really happen, but our founder, Steve Green, had been collecting artifacts and helping out and kept getting offered more
Steve
things.
Green is...
He's the president of Hobby Lobby stores.
Okay.
Yeah. So, their heart was never to just have these biblical artifacts for themselves. They always wanted to share the Bible story with the world. That's what their heart is. So the idea of a museum kind of stuck. And with that, being good business people, they did the market research and said, well, people...
a little practice at that.
A little practice. The market research said Washington, D.C. is where people in America go to visit museums. Not surprisingly, with all the Smithsonian's, the Spy Museum, all of the great attractions in Washington, D.C. And that began this journey. So I joined the team in 2013. I got to be the very first staff member, opened the offices in D.C., and got to be a part of that ongoing construction and design process. We opened in 2017, so we're just shy of 4 years old. And we really do fulfill a very important niche in Washington, D.C. I mean, you can go to the American History Museum, the Natural History Museum, Air and Space, and learn that history. But the reality is the Bible has been integral to all of those histories. We have a whole area that talks about the Bible's impact on America. We have the Lunar Bible, so you go to Air and Space and you see the history of space exploration. But did you know that the astronauts wanted to take the Bible to the moon and built their own special private project to have a microfiche Bible to take with them to the moon? Hoping Mars is next, right?
Right.
So there's just all kinds of things that tie into the history that you won't get at those museums, and we fill that important gap of showing the Bible's role in it, and of course sharing the history and the story of how the Bible came to be, how it was developed through time, history, cultures, how it's gotten across the world, and then the stories themselves. So we present the Bible in a way that whether you're someone that's read the book all your life, or someone who's new to the story, or you're 5 years old, or you're 85 years old, you can appreciate it.
And there's a lot of very unique exhibits and different things. I know we're hanging out at the NRB, and a few years ago, you guys had a huge exhibit in the exhibit hall, and I was walking through it, and one thing that was very interesting is like a VR experience where I see creation and I choose different, what day was this made and that made, when God made it and that. So tell me about maybe that and some other unique exhibits at the museum.
Sure. So you're bringing your kids, right? Yeah. So make sure they do these three things for sure. We do have a VR experience, and it's a VR it enables you to travel to Israel and see those places virtually. That maybe you didn't get to see before, by going to Israel. Hopefully we all get to go to Israel someday. We also have a ride. We're not just a museum, it's really a full attraction. And that ride enables you to soar over Washington, D.C., through Washington, D.C., and see where there's so much scriptures on our federal buildings, on our monuments, all throughout the nation's capital.
So cool. Yeah,
and you even get to smell cherry blossoms as you fly through the, Jefferson Memorial. It's really great. And then we've got the Hebrew Bible experience.
Okay.
So the designers of this space have actually worked on attractions for Disney. It's that high quality, and it really surrounds you with the story of Genesis moving all the way through the time of Ezra and the rediscovery of the Bible there with the book of Ezra. And it's won several awards, actually. It most recently won the Themed Entertainment Association Award.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah,
so let's go back to pastors as we close. So our podcast is all about helping pastors, worship leaders, tech folks enhance the worship experience on Sunday. And you mentioned that, pastors would come in and use your space for those experiences. How can I use the tools and resources that you provide, and maybe things that the museum does for my worship experience or to teach people more about the Bible?
Well, first we invite you to come and reach out to us if you would like to come and film your sermon or do something even in the space. We've had Chris Tomlin do worship sets in our space too and record those, so we can do both. You can also go online, so if you're nowhere near DC, we do have virtual tours. We're releasing different parts of the museum every month. Our members will have full access, but for the public, you can do a virtual tour of the museum and look through the artifacts, the collections pages online, and that'll give you all kinds of information on the history, the impact of the Bible. It's something you can share with your congregations, have lots of great digital content there. So check that out first, and then come see us.
So how can I, give me the website, how can I find out more about you guys?
museumofthebible.org.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey, children's pastors and leaders. Get ready to transform your kids' worship experiences with 1230 Kids. We're serving your children's ministry with a massive ready-made media library with done-for-you countdowns, games, mini-movies, full kids series kits, lyric videos with hand motion versions for kids' worship, and more. Pick up media individually or save with Go Unlimited with plans as low as $33 a month. We also provide custom media for kids' ministries and curriculum providers. We've produced custom graphics and videos for Seeds Family Worship, Awana, Children's Ministry Deals, Go Curriculum, Yancey, and others. We also provide free training for your kids' leaders. Get help with social media, church online, volunteers, programming, worship, and more. Get started today at 1230kids.com. That's 1230kids.com.
The show notes for this episode are available now at makingsundayhappen.com.
Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out the show this week. So glad that you're here. And I hope that you enjoyed our interviews with Clint Lewis and Tia and also Shannon. And I want to encourage you to continue to watch the show because next week will be our third and final week here at NRB. And one of the interviews that I'm going to share next week with you is Mark DeMaz. And Mark is the founder of Mosaic Church, Mosaics with an X, and also the Mosaics Church Planning Network. And one thing that Mark does is help you with multi-ethnic churches and help you transition to a multi-ethnic staff and church. So that's going to be a great time with Mark next week. He shared some fantastic ideas for how to reach your community, multi-races in your community, and build your staff in that way, build your worship experiences in that way so that you can reach more culture and more community in your environments and where you serve in ministry. So stay with us next week for Mark and more interviews here at NRB. So next week will be our final week here at NRB. And so I want to encourage you to check out the NRB. It's a great place to come to the convention, also a great place to get content throughout the year. If you are a church media person, if you're in radio, TV, film, if you have a broadcast ministry at your church, all of that, this is a great place to be a part of. So check out nrb.org for more information. Also check out our website, 1230.media. We would love to serve you there with ready-made and custom media content, as well as training for your church. We'll go out there and create some incredible worship experiences this weekend. I'll catch you next week.
Making Sunday Happen is a production of the ministry of 1230 Media. For show notes, archive episodes, and more free resources for your church, visit makingsundayhappen.com.